Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video in the Spring series. In this episode I'm going to show you how you can use Spring profiles with your bean configurations here. So we know so far how to use the primary annotation and also how to use qualifiers, but there's another way that I want to show you how you can configure which bean is going to be auto-wired into your client beans, and this is using profiles. So in the Spring, we haven't looked at this before, but if you go to the resources folder here and then go to the application.properties file, this is where you can set a bunch of configure operations for your Spring applications. And we're going to see this a lot more in the future, but just the first config option that I want to show you is going to be the profile option. So it's profile, and you get all these suggestions here, but if you do spring.profiles.active is equal to, and then you can set the name of the profile that you want to be active. So by default, it'll just be the default profile, but commonly in real world applications or development teams, you're going to have like maybe a development profile or a production profile. You might see that because of course for your development environment you may want to use some other database, and you can swap out between those databases in using these Spring profiles, and we're going to see how to do stuff like that in the future. And then in a production environment, you may want to use like an actual production database where it has all your clients' details and everything like that, and your actual database stuff. But yeah, there's just a lot of different things that you may want to switch between, but dev and production are like common ones that you might see. Anyway, so I'm going to show you how you can use this with your bean. So first, let's go to our public transportation service, and let's just go ahead and remove this qualifier here. We don't need this right now. And let's also go to each one of these and just make sure they don't have the primary tag on them. Great. Let's get rid of this right here. So now if we run this now, it shouldn't be able to determine a bean to auto wire. So we should get a problem, like a little error. There we go. So yeah, parameter 0 of constructor required a single bean, but 3 were found. So it doesn't know what bean to inject into the public transportation service as we saw before. So let's go to our bus provider service implementation, and we can use the profile annotation here to specify a profile for this bean to be used with. So this bean will only be created if the profile here is active. So we can call this profile anything. This is where you set the profile name, but we're just going to call this one bus. And so this bean here will only be instantiated and picked up by the Spring framework if the bus profile is active. Pretty simple, right? Now let's go to each one of these other ones here and set a profile name for these. So at profile, we'll call this one taxi because this is the taxi provider service. And then finally we have the train provider service. Great. Now let's see what happens when we run this. Great. So now it says parameter 0 of constructor, blah, 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 required a bean of type primary vehicle provider service that could be found. So in this case, it's a little different than the error that we just saw. In this case, it doesn't have any beans at all to auto wire into the public transportation service, because last time it had 3 beans, it didn't know which one to inject, but this time it doesn't have any at all. And this is because we have set different profile names for each of these beans here, these service implementations, and none of these profiles are active. So none of these beans here will be created by the Spring framework and auto wired. So if we want to set our profile, we can do it here as we saw the application.properties file within the resources folder. So let's say that we want to use the bus profile. We can just type bus, and actually Spring gives you auto suggestions for the profiles that you have created within your application code, which is really cool. Spring IntelliJ is really smart. So we're going to use bus, and now if we run this, it should work, no problems. Great, good. It says bus with registration number has left the station and then arrived at the destination. And this is because since we're using the bus profile, the bus bean here, the bus provider service implementation bean, will be created because it has the proper profile name that is being used right now. So this bean will be created, and since that is the only bean that is created within the Spring inversion of control container, it'll be auto-wired into the public transportation service without any issues. But if we do something like go to our taxi implementation, we change this to bus as well, now we're going to have 2 different beans that implement vehicle provider service that are going to be activated and managed by Spring if the bus profile is active. And now we're going to get the original error because we have 2 beans that are in use, but we don't know which one to inject into the public transportation service. So just be careful of that. If you have 2 of the same profiles in use on the same bean type, then you may get that problem because it doesn't know which bean to inject. Now let's say that you don't really have a profile set within the application's properties file. If you run this, again, it's not going to know what to do. No beans are created, so it's not going to inject anything. But if we want to, we can set a bean to use the default profile. So if we want let's say that we want the taxi provider service implementation to be the default implementation, or the default bean that is used for our public transportation service if no profile is specified. So we can just change this profile here to default. And now because we have no profile set within the application properties file, it's going to use the taxi provider service because it is using the default profile here. So if we run this, that's what we should get. Taxi, boom. So taxi is left, taxi has arrived. Great. So the taxi provider service bean was created because that is the default. It is using the default profile. Great. Pretty simple, right? Now, one more thing I want to show you is that if you want to have multiple profiles for your beans, you can do that. So let's say that for some reason we want our bus provider service implementation bean to be created if the bus profile is active or the production profile is active. So we can change this. If you do Control P here, it actually accepts a string array here. So you can do curly brackets and do bus, comma, production, or PROD, or you can just call it production. So now if any of these profiles are active, this will be created and used by Spring. So let's try that out. So I would say profile bus. Now the bus one should be used. Great, so bus one is used, but let's also try PROD for production, and that should also be used by bus, or the bus bean should be used for that. Great, perfect. And of course you can do the same for all of these. So if you want this one to still be the default bean, you could keep it as default, but you can also make it the taxi profile. There we go, taxi. And then the final one is train. So train will be our development bean. How about that? So train and then dev stands for development. Great. Awesome. So now nothing should change except that these are now using multiple profiles. Awesome. Let's say that we want to change to our development profile since we're editing this on our computer, not a production server. And boom, train has left, train has arrived, because of course train is using both train and development. Awesome, perfect. So yeah, that's a very, very basic introduction to Spring profiles and how to use them to configure, which beans are created within your application context. There's a lot more you can do with profiles. We're going to see that in the future. There's different ways you can tell Spring which profiles are being used, but because we're using Spring Boot, this is the most this is the easiest way to do it within the application properties file. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that. That's the third thing that I'm going to show you for configuring which beans are going to be injected into a client bean. In the next episode, I'm going to show you how to do Java configuration. So this whole time, pretty much, these last couple of videos, we've been doing annotation configuration of our beans. So just annotating our classes with service and all that, and the other annotations. But in the next episode, I'm going to show you how you can do it with Java configuration, which is another popular method of configuring your beans. Okay, so stay tuned for that. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. In the description below, I'll leave a link to the code for this episode so you can check it out. You can bookmark it, come back to it later. If you forget any concepts or you just want to review the concepts I taught in this video, I'll mark everything up with comments so you can come back and read the code without having to rewatch the video, although your reviews are greatly appreciated. So yeah, I'll leave a link for that in the description below, so make sure to check it out. And another thing is I'll leave a link to our Discord server. It's a big community for programmers. You can ask for help on your programming projects if you're stuck on something, or maybe you can get some new friends. If you don't have any friends, there's lots of people here. It's growing really fast. You can find lots of people who are passionate about the same things as you. For example, if you like Minecraft Spigot development, you can find lots of people who like that. If you like C++, if you like Java, if you like web development, it's a really, really big programming community. So feel free to join. There's a link for that in the description below. And the last thing I want to tell you is that if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel at any time. You get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, a cool rank on my Discord server like you see right here on the side, YouTube members, and also you get to see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. And thank you. Thanks a lot. And that's it. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and peace.